Hopefully, everybody out there is still safe. If you're not, get well soon. This pandemic truly sucks. It's taking a lot of the joy from every day to day life out of our hands, and we're stuck at home just watching Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all that good stuff. So it's not all that bad considering what we had to deal with back in 1918, from what I hear, or 1919 when the Spanish flu hit. But I figured I would release a video for all my sports fans out there who are clamoring and craving and gnawing at that itch like Tyrone Biggums for some sports news. Real quick before I do that, if you have subscribed to the channel, I truly appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed. This was our best month. I don't know why I say our, like it's not just me. It's been my best month on YouTube. Most views, minutes watched, and subscribers. So if you do subscribe, I really do appreciate it. If you haven't, all it does is it takes the one click of a button. I would appreciate it. So please do that. And then if you like to hear my voice, I do have a podcast. It's called Scene Invaders. We release every Tuesday. Sometimes we release Wednesdays when recording is difficult. We're having trouble right now because obviously getting together in a studio is a little rough. But we do record and we do release pretty regularly every single week. So that covers new movies and TV shows and all that. So check out that. That's Scene Invaders. But now I will go through everything on Netflix and Amazon Prime, because I feel like those are the two most popular streaming platforms that a lot of people have. Everyone seems to have Amazon Prime, so you usually have Amazon Prime video format, and then you also obviously have Netflix. So on top of it, I didn't make a video for what to watch on Netflix, so I will cover on what to watch sports-wise for Netflix. And we start off with Sunderland Till I Die. Full disclosure, I'm not a huge soccer guy at all. I don't know if I've ever actually watched a full soccer match, but this show is so compelling as a sports fan. And if you're unfamiliar, there are 4 divisions in soccer. There is the Premier League, Champions League, then there is, the Premier League, the Championship, League 1, League 2. And obviously, the higher you are, the more money you get because of TV revenue TV revenue. And you obviously want to get in that Premier League. And what happens is in American sports like the NHL, MLB, basketball, football, if you're the worst team in the league, you get the number 1 overall pick in the draft. But in soccer, if you're the worst team in the league, you get relegated down to the bottom division. So this follows a team called Sunderland FC, and they just got relegated from the Premier League down to the Championship. They're trying to get back to the Premier League. It follows them throughout a season. It is so good. And on top of it, the new season drops April 1st. So it is the perfect time to check out Sunderland Till I Die. Once again, you don't have to be a soccer fan to like this show. So good. Cannot suggest it enough. And I feel like not a lot of people have watched it or talk about it. Thrilled that we're getting a second season. The next show, actually it's a movie, Miracle. I'm a huge hockey fan. I love Miracle. It's one of my favorite sports movies. It didn't start out that way. I just kind of thought it was an okay sports movie. But the more I watched it, I got so heavily into it. And I'm a sucker for this movie. And we've got a couple of things with Miracle, but this is the first one. This is Miracle. We got a documentary coming up when I cover HBO as well. Didn't mention that. I'm doing Netflix, HBO, and Amazon Prime. The next one is Iverson. I am in Philadelphia, and I'm 31 years old. I grew up during Allen Iverson's peak. He is one of the toughest athletes I've ever seen in my life. If you want to argue that, by all means, you can try. But this guy was 5'11", went up against trees every night. Guy literally had a commercial that focused on his injuries. That's how tough he was. But he had his problems off of the court, and this covers that. It's a really good look into Allen Iverson, the player, but also the man. The next thing is QB1 Under the Lights. If this was actually made by the same people that focused on Friday Night Lights, the TV show, Pete Berg, I think, is the executive producer of this. But this movie, or the show, I'm sorry, they have 3 seasons, I want to say, and it covers 4 high school quarterbacks. Some are highly touted, some aren't. And for instance, I think in season 1, they have Jake Fromm from Georgia, who's going into the draft. Season 2, they have Justin Fields, who just started at Ohio State. And it's just a good look at high school quarterbacks who are thought of as, quote, like the shit, and what they have to go through day-to-day life, getting recruited, getting not recruited, going to their schools, and and all that good stuff. So I loved it. I was hooked, and I can't wait for the next season whenever it comes out. The next one is Notorious. I am a huge MMA fan. Huge UFC fan. Usually don't miss a card. I'm devastated about the Tony Habib news. But the guy that actually got me into the sport was Conor McGregor. I say that kind of embarrassed because his fans get, I mean, a lot of them are meatheads, right? Like they're Ireland, and his name's McGregor, and my name's O'Malley. But because he got me into the sport, now I've grown to love the sport and watch every card. And I'm not just a McGregor fan, but I'm a fan of the sport. But this documentary is very well done. It follows Conor McGregor, the start of his run from the UFC, then going into the title fight with Chad Mendes, then the Aldo fight, and then I believe it finishes off with his Floyd Mayweather fight. It is very well done, and it's just a good look into one of the superstars in the sport of mixed martial arts. The next one is Gridiron Gang. This is a true story that stars The Rock, and it's before The Rock blew up as Dwayne Johnson, the actor. And I think at the time it was Dwayne The Rock Johnson, so that kind of tells you how far back this was. But it's a decent football movie. It's based on a true story about a corrections officer who starts a football team in a youth correctional facility, and how that football team ended up helping out these kids who were going down a wrong path. So it's kind of in the realm of like a Coach Carter, but I enjoy it, and it's a guilty pleasure that you can kind of put on and let ride. But if you haven't seen it, it is worth watching. The next one on Netflix is, what's the next one? The Carter Effect. A lot like Allen Iverson's documentary, Iverson, The Carter Effect follows another NBA superstar that I grew up with in Vince Carter. But this focuses on his impact on the country of Canada and how he really brought basketball and introduced it to a lot of Canadians who, before that, didn't really care about the sport. So, look, Vince Carter played 4 decades of basketball, which is unbelievable. He's still playing, even though he's going to retire, which is unfortunate. But this documentary really shines a light on the impact that he made. Whereas Allen Iverson made an impact for sure, no one will deny that. The Carter Effect, and it's a very quick documentary, focuses on the impact that he made in the Great White North. The next one is a series called Losers, and this series was so good, and it follows around a couple of different people in sports, and it's about how they lost, whether it be because they lost in a fight, whether it be because they lost in a marathon, but it's a very fascinating look into defeat, but also the stories themselves are just interesting stories. One focuses on a marathon runner in the desert, another focuses on an Iditarod contestant, but I'm telling you, these stories are very well done, and you will be hooked if you're a sports fan. The Losers is really, really, really good. It's one of my top picks. The next one is a movie that's close to my heart, Goon, with Sean William Scott. If you're into comedies and you like hockey, why haven't you seen Goon? Now, Goon is the first one. Goon, Last of the Enforcers is also on Netflix, and that movie is hot garbage. Terrible. But the original Goon, which focuses on a bouncer who is a lovable, he's a goon. I mean, I can't think of a better word than that. On a local hockey team, a minor league hockey team. He joins the team, and there's a hot shot who's just a douchebag that he rooms up with. But very good movie, written by Jay Baruchel, and it is very, very funny. And if you're a hockey fan, this has so many quotable moments in it that, I mean, I play hockey twice a week when there's not a pandemic, and we're constantly quoting this movie. So definitely check out Goon if you are a hockey fan. It is hilarious. The next movie is The Natural. This is a classic baseball movie, but it's old. And if you're one of those baseball fans out there who hasn't seen it because of the fact that it's old, but I'm sure you've heard about it as one of the best baseball movies of all time, you've heard correctly. The Natural is so well done, and on top of it, just to give a little Philadelphia angle to it, The Natural is loosely based off of a former Philadelphia Phillies player named Eddie Waitkus. And I'm not going to get into what happened to Eddie Waitkus, but the same thing happens to Roy Hobbs in The Natural, and it's loosely based off of him. So very good movie, and I cannot suggest that enough. If you're a baseball fan and haven't seen it, you need to change that. The next one is a documentary called Ice Guardians. This focuses on fighters in hockey and their role in hockey, how it's being flushed out of hockey, why it's being flushed out of hockey, if it should be flushed out of hockey. it's a good look into just fighters in a sport that is one of the few sports that allows fighting. A lot of them don't. If you just fight in sports, you get kicked out. But hockey is one of the rare sports that encourages it. Up until recently, they're kind of trying to get it out of the game, and it's a good look into the impact on fighting in hockey for fighters, but also for the people that don't fight and just simply play the sport. The next one is a football movie called Any Given Sunday, and this movie is horrible, but in the best way possible. It's so eccentric, yet so real at the same time. I don't believe that guys are throwing alligators into a shower, but when you look at this movie, focuses on drug abuse, focuses on injuries, focuses on way back when in 1999, this movie was focusing on concussions and forgetting things and all those little things that we're finding out about now. They did it on steroids, if you will. I mean, and that's tongue in cheek because this movie did focus on steroids, but it's a pretty good football movie. In a way, it's kind of a Tom Brady story because the third string quarterback ends up rising the depth chart after a series of injuries and becomes a star. So, and I love the way this movie ended so much. So this is it's a terrible movie, but it's also a great movie at the same time. I love it. You'll find people that love it or hate it. I love it, but I can also admit that Oliver Stone took some liberties that were like, all right, man, you're pump the brakes. The next one is a show, and it actually just got released. It's a 6-part miniseries called The English Game, and this focuses on the early beginning of the sport of soccer in England, and in particular the Premier League and now the 4 divisions that we know. But I'll tell you right now, this show is good. It does focus on a forced love story that wasn't necessary, but it was interesting to see about the sport going from amateurism to players getting paid and how there was a lot of blowback at the time from that. And I enjoyed it, but I did roll my eyes at the forced love story that was not necessary. But it's worth checking out, especially if you like soccer. The next one is a documentary called The Dawn Wall. So Free Solo was the documentary that got a lot of hype a year ago at the Oscars. And that focused on Alex... Oh, I forget his last name. It's like Honnold. I think his name's Honnold, Alex Honnold. Someone's going to write it in the comment section and be like, you idiot, that's not his name. But that documentary got a lot of focus because it was the free soloing of the huge mountain in Yellowstone or Yosemite or one of those national parks. I forget. Look, I saw it a while ago. The Dawn Wall I thought was so much better. And while I didn't like Alex Honnold and thought he was a douchebag, the Dawn Wall, I felt like the climber in that was way, way better. And not necessarily in climbing, just in relatability and in likability. And I really enjoyed the Dawn Wall. I'm obviously not the biggest climbing fan. I don't know if you really can be a fan of climbing, but I enjoyed this documentary. I found it a fascinating look into the sport. The next one is a documentary called Icarus, and this focused on steroids in sports, and in particular cycling, and it was a very fascinating look into the doping that went on over in Russia and their athletes in the Olympics. So we'll segue right into another documentary about steroids and doping, Screwball. But Screwball focused on the doping scandal in Major League Baseball, but not the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa era doping scandal. No, the Alex Rodriguez scandal. And what this documentary did that was so creative is they had these characters and they would tell their story, and then they had children act it out. So you have a child acting out Alex Rodriguez's part, and then you have a child acting out this this guy who's obsessed with tanning and in his industry, and he's all tanned up, but he's got a child portraying him. And it's very well done, but it's a good look into what kind of a shit show Alex Rodriguez was, but also how Major League Baseball desperately tried to once again cover up a steroid scandal. So if you haven't seen Screwball, definitely check that out. Counterpunch was a good look into the amateurism of boxing, but also how shady boxing has become with, yeah, this guy's undefeated, but who's he actually fought? And I just can't think of, I couldn't watch this documentary and not think of the scene in Rocky 3 where Mickey yells at him and said, all you've done is fought tomato cans. This documentary, Counterpunch, focuses on that aspect of the sport. The next one is Late Life, and this is a documentary on the pitcher Chin-Ming Wang. Chin Min Wong, if you're not familiar, was at one point the ace of the New York Yankees, but he blew his arm out. And this documentary focuses on his comeback into Major League Baseball. And this focuses on him from going to the independent league and having to get back up from AAA to finally reaching the majors again, if he is able to reach the majors, and working his arm back up. And it's a good look into how you can go from being a superstar to being humbled in the independent leagues in front of 300 fans in some town that you've probably never heard of. So I really enjoyed this, and it was an avenue of the sport that I really hadn't thought of in depth too much. So Late Life is very good. The next documentary is one called The Battered Bastards of Baseball. And this was a fascinating look that came out a couple of years ago into a AAA team, and I wasn't familiar with the story, a AAA team that was independent. It wasn't affiliated with any Major League Baseball team, and it was just owned by this guy, and they had to go off and, because it wasn't affiliated with Major League Baseball, baseball teams weren't sending their players to this team, so they had to go out and have open tryouts, and it is a great, great documentary. I had a lot of fun with this one when I watched it, and it's a good underdog story. And finally on Netflix is the movie Ali. It's long, but it is good, and it's a good look into the man, Muhammad Ali. Obviously, starring in it was Will Smith. He did a phenomenal job, but this movie still holds up. So that was Netflix, and we'll focus right into Amazon Prime. Now, Amazon Prime didn't have a ton of movies or documentaries like Netflix did, but we'll start off with Creed 2. Creed 1, the first one, was tremendous. Creed 2 is, I think, very good. It's not as good as the first one, but it is a worthy sequel, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. I really enjoyed it. Didn't enjoy it as much as Creed 1, but I still really, really enjoyed it. So if you haven't watched it, check out Creed 2. The next one, I actually have to move my paper here. Blue Chips. Blue Chips. Man, I think a lot of basketball fans out there are fully aware that there is a shadiness that goes on in amateur sports, especially college basketball. And Blue Chips, way back in the 90s, focused on this angle of college basketball, having to pay players to come to your school. Nick Nolte stars in it, but it also features a young Penny Hardaway, a young Shaquille O'Neal, and because of this movie, actually, they became really good friends, and it forced the trade to get Penny Hardaway to the Orlando Magic. So that's just a fun backstory of this movie, but really, really, really well done movie into just the shadiness that is college basketball. It still is today, actually. The next one is the All or Nothing series. I said this when I did my Amazon Prime movies, videos that you should watch, which you should check out. It's in my channel. But the All or Nothing series, I was pumped for the Eagles one to come out because I'm a huge Eagles fan. And it glossed over so much of that season that I was left pissed off. It's still worth watching, and they have a ton of them. They feature Manchester City, the soccer team. They feature the All Blacks, the New England or the New Zealand rugby team, and they feature a bunch on football teams, whether it be the Arizona Cardinals or the Carolina Panthers. It's worth watching for sure, especially if you're looking to scratch that itch of football. I just want to preface it by saying they left a lot out that only if you were a fan of that team would you have noticed. The next one is the Bad News Bears, and this is the remake, not the classic. Obviously, the classic is that. It's a classic. I don't think the Bad News Bears, the remake, was as awful as people make it out to be. It's not the classic, but I still chuckled at it a few times. I mean, I still think Billy Bob Thornton was decent in it. But yeah, all right, it's not the classic. I get it. I don't think it's an abomination the way that some people made it out to be. And I think it's worth watching, for sure. The next one is A Football Life. There are a lot of these if you're interested in just the life of one of your favorite athletes, or just maybe somebody that you had simply heard about. These are a great documentary series, 45 minutes each, 50 minutes, and they go into the football life of people that, once again, you probably have heard about if you're a football fan, but maybe not known that much about, and it goes into their life as a person, but also a player. The next one is The Mighty Max. I'm putting this on the list. This is the only thing on the list that I have not seen. I'm putting this on the list for my friend Anthony Gargano, coworker. I think he would call me a coworker. I'll call him a friend. But he wrote this movie, and it is the true story of Kathy Rush, who's a female basketball coach who won the NCAA tournament with Little Immaculata University, which is just outside of Philadelphia. Little movie that kind of came and went, and you probably didn't even know it existed, but it stars Carla Gugino and David Boreanaz. So I'll put it on the list for my boy Anthony Gargano, the Cuz. Check that movie out. The next one is Fourth and Long. Hear me out on this one. It follows the LA Kiss Arena football team that was bought and owned by Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley from Kiss. Once you get over that aspect and you get sold, you brush that aside that this is focusing on, one, the Arena League, but two, a Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons run football team. It's actually a decent look into the industry and the business side of the Arena League and what a shit show it can be, and what happens when maybe a trigger-happy GM, owner, co-owner is running things. Full disclosure, and this could shock a lot of people, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley know nothing about football. And this dates back to 2014, so the LA Kiss don't even exist anymore. But they do have to have the reality angle with a kicker dating a cheerleader and he's cheating on his girlfriend. But the football stuff, I found it interesting as a sports fan. I did end up following along with it and found it interesting of what a shit show that season was for those guys. They came out guns blazing saying they were going to win the championship. Shockingly, an expansion team has trouble doing that in like literally every sport except the Vegas Golden Knights. The next year one is the 4-year plan. I talked about Sunderland Till I Die and the 4 tiers of English soccer. The Queen's Park Rangers were bought by this group of people that want to get them into the Premier League within 4 years. And it's a shit show, but in the best way possible. These guys are kind of like Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. They really don't know what they're doing, and they're firing everybody, and it's just such a train wreck that I loved every part of it. So, and once again, I'm not the biggest soccer fan in the world, but these documentaries that focus on the business angle of sports, they're very well done, and the 4-year plan is another one. The next one is No No. If you're not familiar with Doc Ellis, this guy threw a no-hitter with the Pittsburgh Pirates on LSD. The documentary No No covers that. The identity theft of Mitch Mustaine. I'm 31, as I said earlier, and when I was in high school, one of the big-time kids coming out of high school, one of the big-time prospects in the nation, which was this kid, Mitch Mustaine, and he committed to Arkansas. And it follows him going from can't-miss quarterback to what the hell happened to Mitch Mustaine. So I love this documentary. It's a good look into just the misses sometimes that happen in college sports. The next one is Tough Guy. The Bob Probert story. If you're not familiar with Bob Probert, he was one of the toughest guys in the sport of hockey in the late 80s, mid 90s, and then he retired, and unfortunately he passed away. But it's a documentary that focuses on his life coming up from a small town in Canada and eventually making the NHL, and all the things that he had to deal with being a fighter in the league and having to deal with injuries and whatnot. The next one is Take Us Home Leeds. A lot like Sunderland Till I Die, Take Us Home Leeds is Amazon Prime's version of Sunderland Till I Die. Leeds United was once a storied, famous, I mean they still are famous, but storied, proud franchise. They have gotten a new owner, a new coach, and they're trying to get promoted to the English Premier League. And it's a really good look into the struggle that English teams have, and it's a good look into the business angle of a sport. And then finally, this is maybe a tough sell for some, but the Barkley Marathons is one of the best documentaries that I will mention throughout this whole video. It focuses on one of the toughest endurance races that is in, I believe, the state of Kentucky or maybe Tennessee. But basically, this crazy guy started this 26-mile this race. And to finish the race, he calls it 5 loops. And 5 loops is 26 miles. So 1 marathon. You have to finish 5 loops in 2 days. So you have to run 5 marathons in 2 days. The entry fee for this is like $1.85. And all he charges is $1.85 and whatever he needs. So if the guy needs shirts, it's $1.85 and a white shirt. If the guy needs socks, $1.85 and socks. And people come from all over the world to do this crazy endurance race, just to see how far they can get into it. Nobody truly expects to finish it, but it is a fascinating look into why the fuck would people do this. And then we'll finally move on to HBO. So HBO, I covered a lot of these in my HBO video, but the sports version of this video, the sports stuff that you should watch. 7 Days in Hell is a great mockumentary that features Andy Samberg and Kit Harington, and it kind of riffs off of John McEnroe, but it is hysterical. Really, really funny stuff. The next one is the Andre the Giant documentary. I was a little disappointed in this. but it's still good, and it's still a good look into a guy that literally, you stop anyone on the street, they've heard of Andre the Giant. The next one is Do You Believe in Miracles? And this focuses a lot like on the movie Miracle, on the 1980 Miracle on Ice team. This documentary was done before the movie Miracle took place. It features Herb Brooks, unlike the movie Miracle, because unfortunately he passed away before the movie Miracle came out. And it confirms a lot that went on in the movie Miracle, but I think it's still worth watching, and it's still interesting to get the firsthand take from a lot of these players. The next one is Hoop Dreams. This focuses on another documentary on two high school basketball stars way back in the 80s, and it just follows them from high school and then eventually into college and where they go in life. Not so much the college part and where they go in life. It really just focuses on the 4 years of high school, the most of the documentary, but it does give you an update on where they go in college and eventually in life. But good look into two different players that really went on different career paths totally. So it is a little long, though, I'll tell you that, and it's definitely dated. I mean, shorts galore in this one. The next one is Momentum Generation. Much like soccer, I'm not a surfing fan at all. I'm not sitting there glued to Pipeline. But this focuses on a guy that, once again, a lot of people, just like Andre the Giant, know, a guy in Kelly Slater. But not just Kelly Slater, his group of friends, and how they went from being friends from the ages of like 13 to growing up, eventually becoming professional, and then eventually becoming rivals. I've watched this documentary about 3 or 4 times. It came out, I think, a year and a half ago. It is so, so good. You definitely do not need to be a fan of surfing to enjoy this, because it's more of about how a business can take friends and pull them apart and then eventually bring them back together. The next one is the Runnin' Rebels of UNLV. Before there was basketball powerhouses like Kentucky, and I know people are going to be like, Kentucky was always a basketball powerhouse. I'm talking when Calipari got there. There was a team in University of Nevada, Las Vegas, that was run by this guy named Jerry Tarkanian that was the 90s powerhouse. And they had dominant teams, and this focuses on just the rise and the fall of the UNLV Runnin' Rebels franchise. I don't know why I said franchise. It's just a school. It's not like they did buy players. The next one is a show called Arliss. This one's another dated show or documentary, if you will, but this is a show in this particular case. And it follows around a sports agent named Arliss. Half hour, very well done. I enjoy it. Next one is a shitty show called Ballers. I only suggest this one if you're really hard up. It stars The Rock, and it's not good. I hate watch this show until the very end this past season. But if you're really, really hard up for a show, sure, Ballers. But I put this way down on the list. The next one is the movie 61. I actually had a guy from Facebook tell me that he had never heard of 61, and he watched it based on my HBO movie. So take his word for it. Take my word for it. The movie 61 that focuses on Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle trying to break Babe Ruth's home run record in the 1961 season is so well done. Barry Pepper stars in it. Billy Crystal directed it. He's a huge Yankees fan, so he wouldn't go wrong with his favorite franchise, and he doesn't. Phenomenal movie. Great, great, great movie. If you've not seen 61, highly recommend it. The next one is a movie called The Big Green. If you have kids out there, and if you're my age, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, you remember The Big Green from your childhood. But if you have kids out there, they'll definitely enjoy this. It is the quintessential kids movie, all right? You have a team that sucks. A new coach shows up. Randomly, they get, like, some transfer kid to come in. And then he, like, all of a sudden the team becomes really good. It's exactly what you expect. But, I mean, I still enjoy it. I still watch it for nostalgia purposes. I still showed it to my 15-month-old. He didn't get it. Moving on. In the same vein, D1, 2, and 3, The Mighty Ducks. Need I say more? The next one is For Love of the Game. Kevin Costner plays a very old but good pitcher. Not as good as he used to be. Used to be a dominant pitcher, but he's in the twilight of his career, and he is in the process of throwing a no-hitter while also reflecting on his career. And it's very well done. I love this movie so much. The next one is The Great White Hype. It stars Samuel L. Jackson as a boxing promoter who has this guy, and I think it's Marlon Wayans. I want to say it's one of the Wayans brothers, who is an incredible boxer but unmotivated at this point. But he lost one amateur fight, and Samuel L. Jackson takes it upon himself to go find that amateur who is no longer boxing, train him up, hype him up as this guy that can beat this unbeatable Floyd Mayweather type boxer. And it's ironic because Floyd Mayweather did lose an amateur fight. His actually last amateur fight, I believe, in the Olympics, he lost. So it's funny though. It's okay. It's an okay movie. It's all right. But if you're looking for a movie in the sports realm that you haven't seen, I'm pretty positive you probably haven't even heard of The Great White Hype. The next one is the movie Paterno. HBO made this movie. Stars Al Pacino as Joe Paterno. Focuses on Joe Paterno in the later part of his Penn State run and the scandal that transpired. Very, 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 very good. And the next movie is Rush. And this focused on the IndyCar race and the rivalry between Niki Lauda and who's the other one? Hunt. James Hunt. And I love this movie so much. I think it came out in 2015. It was my favorite movie from 2015. Love it. If you haven't seen this movie, directed by Ron Howard, rectify that. Watch this movie. And then Real Sports with Brian Gumbel. I'm a sucker for Real Sports. I love this series. And they have a bunch of episodes dating back. If you haven't watched it because you don't like Brian Gumbel, I made that mistake for years. Don't make the same mistake that I did for years. It's a very, very good look into sports, but everything outside of just, the points and winning and losing. And then I'll give you one bonus one from YouTube. I'm a sucker for the SB Nation YouTube channel. If you don't follow me, then follow that. Although, please do follow me. And there's a really good documentary that they did. It's about 4 or 5 parts called Foul Play. So you just type in Foul Play on YouTube, it'll pop up. And it's a good look into the shadiness that is the SEC in recruiting, but it focuses on the Laramie Tunsil issue. And if you're not familiar with Laramie Tunsil was at one point the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. Go back, look at some mock drafts. I'm telling you, he was. And eventually, quarterbacks ended up going to the #1 overall pick. It was Jared Goff and then my boy Carson Wentz. But Laramie Tunsil was still the #1 tackle in the draft. He was supposed to be a top 5 pick. At the very least, top 10. But then all of a sudden, on draft night, some videos were leaked to the media and his draft slot slipped. A lot of people think it was an uncle. Some people think it was an agent. But this documentary goes into exactly what happened, but also the shadiness that is recruiting. So thank you, everybody, for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel. I would really, really appreciate it. You can't get paid until you get 1,000 subscribers, and I am far from that. So like this video. Dislike this video if you think it sucks. You can leave a comment, but I don't read the comments because there'll be like 100 nice comments, but that one comment that tells me it sucks, it hurts my feelings. So I just avoid them. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you next time I talk to you, I guess.